Alright, so we are back for the second match of top 4 here at the Game Cafe PC. I'm excited. Jake, are you excited?
I'm so excited. This round 1 was really fun. We got to see just how threatening Mewtwo Lele can be in game 1 in round 1, and then we got to see Ethan expertly bring it back after kind of a poor start, and so it'll be really fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, and so it's this is kind of one of those weird positions where basically you can kind of imagine that this is almost like a best of 5, right?
Right.
So they got to play the first best of 3, and now at this point, Ricky kind of has to do a come from behind win, right? So he has to win 2 more, and he's seen a lot of information, and Ethan hid a decent chunk of information, right? So the first game, he hid the fact that he had gravity. So he just tried to rely on Trick Room alone. Game 2, he showed gravity and Trick Room, but hid the fact that his team has Tailwind.
Right.
And then game 3, Ricky comes out and he's like, I am stopping Trick Room, and I'm not going to let you have it. And then Ethan was like,
Ethan
all
said,
right,
I don't
fine.
want it.
I Tailwind, so
yeah.
no big deal. You can have it. So, just the way that Ethan changed things up. And I think it was a really nice way of, game 1, right? Ricky really held his cool, right? Just kept calm, kept steady, waited out, Trick Room, waited out Gravity. So then he dominated game 1 with kind of like a reverse all sweep.
Yep.
And then Ethan playing kind of the long con, keeping his cool after game 1, not tilting, and then just staying focused on, what his team mechanics were. So, I mean, I'm excited for this best of 3 here to kind of figure out how things are going to play and adjust based on what both players have seen.
Yeah, for sure. It'll be pretty cool to see, if their leads are the same, if their win conditions are the same. I believe this is the lead that Ricky was going with games 2 and 3 of their first set. And then this is what Ethan had started with towards the beginning of the match. And so it looks like Ethan reverting back to that Trick Room mode that he was using earlier on.
Absolutely. So we do have this Smeargle, which we do know has Fake Out and Spore, as well as Spiky Shield. And so there's a lot of threatening potential from this Smeargle right now. We've seen that it's faster than an Incineroar in other matches. This Bronzong, we've seen all the moves that come out of this thing. We know that Trick Room is a potential threat against Ricky here. So there's a lot of issues that we can see here. So Crobat gonna go ahead and go for the taunt. Ethan, understanding that taunt is coming, he's like, hey, follow me, let's go, let's play this game. And Ricky had revealed that he has got this eruption, but Ethan previously understanding that, hey, Bronzong's weak to fire moves, let me give it a berry that resists these super effective, fire type moves. So even though this is a sun boosted, full, max HP eruption coming out of a special attacking Groudon, it still survives. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is pretty good, although it's kind of a similar position where now Ethan has to let something eat an eruption on the way in, because there's no way this Groudon's doing anything other than eruption right now.
Right.
This Bronzong, it won't be able to damage it enough to mitigate that damage. And the Crobat, while it's not doing a whole lot right now, it has the option to Super Fang something on the way in as well. And so, if you're Ethan, you honestly... Well, no, never mind. I was going to say you might want to leave Smeargle in and let it get knocked out to struggle, just so you don't have to take an attack on the way in, but it has Fake Out, so you can't even struggle yet.
Yeah.
And so Smeargle is either I guess you could just leave it as dead weight and get that free switch, but at the same time, Smeargle's still somewhat useful just because it does have access to that Fake Out, and so...
Looks like you're just calling the shots today, Jake. Are you the one playing or are these people playing? Because, again, Ethan is going to go ahead and go for that Fake Out, which only works on the first turn, so it does fail. Bronzong has already eaten that Fire Berry, so he's taken full damage fire, super effective attacks from this full health Groudon, but he does get the gravity off on his way out.
I really don't mind that from Ethan, just because there's nothing you could have done to prevent Bronzong from going down unless you want to let 2 things take a bunch of damage. And so, you get the gravity up on your way out. you're able to bring in your Groudon this turn and know that you're not going to miss your Precipice Blades. And so at this point, you kind of force Ricky to start, picking things that you might want to let get knocked out.
And so at this point, I don't think that we've seen all the attacks that Crobat has. So I don't think that we've seen whether or not it has Haze.
Right.
So it could be a Haze Crobat, which is always a threat. And I think that's something that Ethan will always respect. But at this point with Gravity, right, that shouldn't be too much of an issue with Gravity and Trick Room, I imagine.
Right. Well, since Gravity's at Precipice Blades, you'll be able to hit the Crobat. But if it's carrying a Focus Sash, you could just click Haze until it gets knocked out, because Crobat being the fastest thing on the field means it's moving last in Trick Room. And so if either of these Pokemon, the Xerneas or the Groudon, want to go for their setup moves, whether it be Swords Dance or Geomancy, the Crobat being faster than both of them means it will be hazing, the very last thing. Clearly opting not to go for that yet, though. Maybe not carrying Haze and maybe just wanting to preserve the Crobat for later.
So one interesting thing about this is that it definitely means that with Incineroar coming out here, that he either doesn't have Tapu Lele or Mewtwo. So, Ricky making sure that he's got an Intimidate out, trying to reduce the amount of damage that's coming out of this Groudon, which probably keeps his Incineroar around here. Ethan, understanding what position he's in, going for the Dazzling Gleam, just trying to get a little bit of chip damage, doesn't want to go for Geomancy and reduce the amount of attacking ability that this Xerneas has just yet. Probably wanting to save that to the last turn of Trick Room. And then that Earth Power coming out of Ricky's special attacking Groudon, doing a huge amount of damage.
Yeah, that's a really big chunk. The nice thing about Earth Power is that you don't care about Intimidate, and you have a more reliable way to hit it. So, Ricky not having to worry about, well, even though Gravity's up, he wouldn't have worried anyway, but he wouldn't have to worry about, the potential to miss the other Groudon, and gets a huge chunk of damage off with Earth Power, to the point where his Incineroar is very likely able to knock it out with something like a Dark Attack or a Flare Blitz if he wants to. And since Trick Room is still up, if this Incineroar is trained to be slower, it's very likely that Incineroar is going to be moving before Groudon.
Yeah, and it looks like he understands that he's at least put on enough pressure on Ethan that he might just be able to get away with a little bit of trickery here. So Ethan is going to go ahead and go for the Geomancy close to the last turn of Trick Room, if not the last turn of Trick Room, I believe. And so now at this point, Ricky, again, wanted to put on that pressure of having Fake Out, trying to bait Ethan into protecting a very low health Groudon to keep it alive. And then, going ahead and just putting that Earth Power into Ethan's Groudon just in case. But yeah, now we've got a fully powered up Xerneas. And then he gets that nice free switch into Crobat.
Yeah, I don't think Trick Room ended,
I did not see the alert for it, no, but we should see it come up on one of the tabs coming up shortly.
Right, yeah, this is probably the last turn of Trick Room, and so, if that Crobat is holding a Focus Sash, and it does have Haze, that's really nice for Ricky, because the Groudon will move first, it'll bring it down to its Sash with the Precipice Blades, and then it'll be able to get that Haze off.
Wow. So with that Intimidate from Incineroar, that actually kept that Crobat around. So that might just be a very bulky Crobat, because we did not see a Focus Sash pop. He's still at like 23 HP here. Going to go down to the Dazzling Gleam, but got the Haze off as kind of a last-ditch effort. So now Incineroar is going to be able to come back out here and intimidate that Groudon once again.
Yeah, that was nice. I didn't really expect Crobat to even take a -1 Precipice Blades. Like you said, it might just be trained to be bulky. I don't really know Crobat's HP stats very well, and so I couldn't tell you whether that seemed high or low, but
that's not usually a thing that you necessarily
right.
a Crobat for, is to take super effective ground moves, right?
Yeah.
Like that's not exactly something that you always consider when you're building a team. But now we've got Incineroar here, which has Fake Out. Mewtwo is out and about, so it looks like Tapu Lele was the one Pokemon that Ricky was like, that didn't help out quite enough, because that was a choice scarf and therefore locked into a specific move, Tapu Lele. So now we've got the pressure of Incineroar's Fake Out, putting a lot of threat on this Groudon.
Yeah, leaving Lele behind makes sense too, because if you want to use your Incineroar to stall out Trick Room, your own Psychic Terrain will be blocking Fake Out, and so not a super helpful member of the team, and I think that was a good adjustment from Ricky. But now he does have that Fake Out pressure. This Mewtwo is going to be faster than both the Xerneas and the Groudon, and it's going to have its pick of the litter. He's going to... I imagine Ricky will be faking out one and targeting the other with Mewtwo, but Ethan quite likely will be double protecting to kind of block that option too. So it all just kind of depends on how these players want to play this.
Wow, what a good call from Ricky. Doesn't even bother going into that Groudon with Fake Out. Thinks that he's just going to pick it up straight away. But Xerneas stopped from moving. So actually, not a bad call from Ethan. Knowing that Groudon would have the KO picked up immediately from Mewtwo, taking minimal damage from Xerneas, but keeping Groudon around so that he's got that second slot to have to choose from.
Yeah, exactly. I like that Ethan protected Groudon because it forces Ricky to acknowledge that slot this turn. If he did allow Groudon to go down that turn, then Incineroar and Mewtwo would only have to target the Xerneas instead of having to split their attacks. And so it kind of forces Ricky to be thoughtful about this turn again, as opposed to just clicking the obvious buttons.
So Groudon is the first one to be targeted down, which does unfortunately mean that the extremely harsh sunlight will fade. So anything coming out of Incineroar that is a fire-type move will no longer be boosted by the sun that no longer exists. So we do see a Flare Blitz coming into this Xerneas here, doing a pretty good chunk of damage. I mean, imagining the sun was still around, that would have been a hefty sum of HP.
Right. At this point, Psystrike looks like it probably won't be able to pick up Xerneas from here. And if something like a Dazzling Gleam might be able to knock both out, but I don't know if Mewtwo will go down to a Dazzling Gleam. That Moonblast, barely did over half.
Yeah, so Dazzling Gleam should do a good chunk less, right?
Right. Yeah, and so if Ethan can only pick up one KO this turn, then that's going to be the game in Ricky's favor.
Yeah, so that's Xerneas, unfortunately. Oh, wow, no. Again, so sorry that happened earlier in the day, that it was really close. So the HP just didn't quite show up, right. That it was still there. Because that on our screen looks like that's a Xerneas with 0 HP.
Where's my 1080p?
Yeah, right. 1080p 60, where is it? I want my 4K stream. But it looks like Xerneas is going to get picked up here. So yeah, I think at that point, Ethan understanding that basically he's got one of one choices, or one of two choices. Either he tries to go for Dazzling Gleam and get a double crit, and maybe the rolls are in his favor, or he picks up one KO and kind of gets another mental damage calc there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad... Yeah, that's a good point. He kind of knows that about how much damage his Pokemon do at this point. So yeah, I really like the way that Ricky played that end game. At the beginning of the game, he did a lot of damage that immediate turn one, and from then on, Ethan was kind of on the back foot. He got Trick Room up, and he got that free switch into both of his restricteds, but it just wasn't enough because he started that game so far behind and did almost no damage the first two turns, if any at all.
And so one interesting thing about this is that, just going back to team construction here, right? So we've seen a lot of mind games going on between these players where they've been kind of changing up how they play. So having Tapu Lele not available could bait Ethan into potentially, bringing Persian in. Persian likely has something like Fake Out. We know that Smeargle has Fake Out because we've seen it. And what's interesting about Ricky's team is that basically the only Pokemon that can be faked out on his team is that Landorus, right?
Right.
Because you've got Inner Focus likely on Crobat. So, I mean, I really enjoy looking at all the moving parts here.
No, I do too. It's more fun. You get to see all the different options, and you get to kind of look at how these players might make some changes. But Ethan going with the same deal. He knows he won a game with it. He knows he can do it again. But Ricky deciding to go with that Crobat Groudon again, and this lead has done really well for him. It's a lot of immediate pressure. Even though he can't stop Trick Room because Smeargle does have Follow Me, he can prevent any Spores from Smeargle with Taunt. If he tries to catch Ethan getting cute, he can taunt the Bronzong and prevent Trick Room. And so this is just kind of a cover-all option for Ricky because Ethan doesn't want to switch into this at all. He does not want to let anything take these full power disruptions.
Right. And so, again, it's kind of a really difficult spot for Ethan, or at least Ricky, right? So we know essentially what options there are. And so, Crobat, right, that can go for a Taunt, it could go for Super Fang, and it's kind of tough to be okay, well, we break the Sash on Smeargle, and then you can knock it out with Eruption, right? because then at that point, then he's got an open switch to bring in. Ethan has an open switch to bring in his own Groudon.
Right.
So it's really tough, and we've talked about this all day, where positioning is very vital in these matchups.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's this like, I feel like in 2016 there was a lot of concern that these GS Cup formats were just like, who does the most damage fastest? And I think that right now, 2019, especially in this Ultra Series, is definitely, at least in this tournament, showing that positioning is so important.
Yeah, it's a little bit slower than 2016 was. 2016 was a lot of. I'm not going to say it was entirely offense, because there was still those games where it was a lot of positioning, especially if you take a matchup like the double primal mirror. A lot of that was who could position their primals in a better spot, and so there was a lot of interaction in 2016 as well, more than people give it credit for. But I think that's only increased since then, which is really cool to watch.
Yeah, and so at this point, right? So basically, the way that Ricky has kind of played this out, that I genuinely just appreciate, is that he understands that preserving some of these KOs, because Smeargle being taunted is no longer a threat, and we saw that the last game. So that Smeargle is essentially just dead weight, and this is pretty neat stuff. Seeing him prioritize that Bronzong instead of going for Eruption again, keeping a taunted Smeargle. Well, I guess he's going for Super Fang, which at 1 HP, Super Fang does 1 damage. So I'm giving him a lot of credit here, but unfortunately that part doesn't necessarily make a difference.
No, I was thinking the same thing though, because if like on that turn, if you did something like double protect or not, you can't protect Crobat. It doesn't care protect generally. Right. But
if it had like haze or something, right? That's
right. Like if you chose not to take a knockout there, you could just stall out an extra turn of Trick Room, which could have been really helpful for Ricky. Obviously not necessary, because we know he won game 1 with the same exact first 2 turns. But if I get attacking there still, because it covers Ethan trying to call that play and then like hard switching Smeargle instead of getting it knocked out. But that's when you're up a game, that's a risk that you could take if you really wanted to. If you don't see a reason for Ethan to make a different play. But obviously he's still up 4-2. He's not taken 2 knockouts while having 0 damage taken himself, and there's really not much. I don't think his Groudon can get knocked out this turn either, unless something like a critical happens too. So this is still a pretty good spot for Ricky.
We've seen that neither player really has the capacity here, because I think the Incineroar switches in, intimidates Ethan's Groudon, and Ethan's Groudon can't pick up a KO on either Pokemon here unless there's potentially a critical hit, which would be very unfortunate. But yeah, like this is essentially playing out almost identical to how the last game worked out in function. Obviously, it's looked a little bit different because of the flamethrower and the Super Fang, but it's been pretty similar overall.
Yeah, Xerneas straight for the Moonblast too. So if this is an Earth Power into the Groudon, it's almost the same game, I would say.
Yeah, so here we go, that Earth Power going straight into that Groudon. And that's a pretty decent chunk of damage. I think that's just a higher roll than what we saw last time. So for those of you who might not know out there, each Pokemon attack has a minimum and maximum amount of damage, and it's a small variation that keeps things a little interesting. And it looks like the first time we saw that, it might have been maybe a minimum, I think is kind of fair. And this might have been a maximum roll.
What is the roll? Is it like 10% either direction from the average?
I think that sounds about right.
That?
Yeah, I think it might be 5% either side of the average, but a 10% overall window.
Something like that. But the point stands, though, that not every attack is going to do the exact.
Yeah, so Ethan, understanding that his Groudon is in a pretty precarious situation yet again, we're getting word here that it is about a 15% because it's 85 to 100%.
Okay.
So looks like Ethan is going to knock out that Incineroar here, and then Flamethrower coming out from Ricky, understanding that Groudon protected last time, and it's the same position. This is kind of like a weird Groundhog Day situation, and Ricky is definitely adapting.
Right. Well, it's a smart play from Ricky, because the fake out into the Groudon slot covers the Groudon not protecting, and then the Xerneas. It could have Geomantied, but it would have that would have been a kind of a bold move, because the Crobat's still in the back. Presumably, it did show haze last game, right? Yeah, it did. And so he knew that a Geomancy wouldn't be super helpful for him. And so now this Mewtwo, it's threatening a KO on either, because right now you can't just freely Geomancy if you're Xerneas, because if Mewtwo calls that, it's going to Psy Strike you and knock you out. And so I like the Mewtwo coming in here instead of Crobat, because it kind of forces the choice from Ethan instead of giving him a clear option.
Yeah, and obviously this is the last turn of Trick Room, so Ethan has the chance that he could try and go for the Geomancy here, but as Jake said, that's a very risky proposition here. And so we do have Mewtwo Y going for that Mega Evolution to become Mewtwo, Mega Mewtwo Y. And then Ethan is just going to go ahead and go for those Precipice Plays, try and take out that Groudon. Because Gravity is in effect, there is no chance of missing here. And now it comes down to what this Xerneas wants to do.
It's going to be really close.
Ethan absolutely covering that option, and it looks like Mega Mewtwo Y surviving with 2 HP. And the Psy Strike is going to come out here. It is a special attack, but it hits on the defensive side, so that Xerneas is barely going to survive as Trick Room ends.
I think the special attack drop actually just won the game for Ethan. Because this Crobat, unless the Crobat has like Brave Bird or something, it's not going to be able to take these knockouts. Or unless Mewtwo has some like Dazzling Gleam or something, which is not the case, I'm sure. Yeah, but this Crobat on its own isn't going to be able to take these... No, take a knockout at all if it's only a damaging move with Super Fang, and so I think that special attack drop actually just won the game for Ethan there, because the Psy Strike barely missed that KO.
Yeah, and so, I mean, we've seen Mewtwo use a couple different moves, but I don't know if we've seen all 4.
I think we've seen Aura Sphere and Psy Strike and Protect.
Yeah, so, like, now it's kind of a little bit of a mind game. Ethan has to make sure... Psy Strike going into that Groudon slot. That's a great call. Super Fang going into the Xerneas, which is going to reduce its HP some, but not a lot. Dazzling Gleam should pick up this Mega Mewtwo Y and do very little damage to Crobat, but as you said, like...
that was Ethan trying to throw.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't think there was any reason to protect there. Like, if you basically win if he doesn't have Brave Bird, and you lose if he does. And so, if by protecting there, if Ricky happened to Psy Strike the Xerneas that turn, then the game was over and Ethan lost, even though it looks like he doesn't have Brave Bird. And so there was an interesting choice from Ethan. Obviously it worked and he's going to win this game, but I feel like that was a very unnecessary risk.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure. I don't think that Mewtwo carries any risk of any spread moves.
I think the only one it might learn is Dazzling Gleam, but there's literally no reason for you to do that on Mewtwo Y.
Yeah, and right now, because of the sun, Blizzard would be a poor choice.
Yeah, I guess it gets Icy Wind. It could do that if it really wanted to.
So it just seems kind of interesting. I don't know what Ethan was trying to respect there, but obviously he was trying to respect some sort of threat from that Mewtwo, or just trying to style on somebody, right? We've seen Pokemon players before that try to win with style points, right?
That was a pretty big risk to take on the name of style points. I think... Yeah, I don't really know. Like, I can't think of a reason why protecting there would have been the right play, because, like I said, if Crobat has an attacking move, you lose, like, immediately. There's nothing you can do about that. If Crobat doesn't have an attacking move, you win by double attacking the Mewtwo.
Yeah.
And I don't see a way that either of those could have gone wrong. And so, I don't really know what the deal was there.
Yeah, that was kind of rough. Watching Ethan go ahead and protect that Groudon, like, it worked out in his favor. So, subjectively, we can't really say that it was wrong because it got a win, right? And we don't know exactly what was in his head. So, not knowing, because we've seen Icy Wind on a lot of weird Pokemon lately. So it's kind of interesting to... There's a lot of weird potential things that can happen in Pokemon, so it's difficult to understand exactly what was in Ethan's mind, but superficially, for sure, that looks like an interesting decision.
Right. Well, it's important for Ricky here to kind of forget that happened. Like,
right.
on one level, you know that you played that game well, and you know if you didn't get the special attack drop from Moonblast, that game was over anyway. And so there was a little bit of like, well, I should have won that game, blah blah blah. And then whenever that happens and you don't win, it can be pretty frustrating. And so Ricky, if he can like regroup here, kind of take a little bit of time to.
Before the screen fades away, I want to. Oh man, I missed it. All the Pokemon there were male, every single one.
Oh yeah.
Everything that was available. The Persian, the Salamence, the Smeargle, Landorus, Incineroar, and Crobat were all male.
Right.
So, not that really comes up that often, but if somebody wanted to take advantage of that in the near future, you might be able to have something.
Start using a cute charm.
So now we are jumping into Game 3. So now at this point, this is kind of a similar situation to what we saw Game 3 in Round 1, right? So Ethan has decided that he wants to bring the Tailwind mode, and Ricky probably understands that that's a potential threat. So because we've got Follow Me from Smeargle, and Taunt from Crobat, and like there's a lot of moving parts here. But how do you feel about this lead out from Ethan? Like going again 2 games in a row with Trick Room, and then deciding to bring his Tailwind team Game 3.
I mean I like it from Ethan. I think that's the Game 3 in Round 1 was when he won more convincingly. And I think this lead is why I think Salamence was doing a lot of work for him in that game. And so I like the switch up, especially if you kind of expected this lead from Ricky again, because you have you can't stop both Spore and Tailwind if you're Ricky. You have to pick one or the other. And so he picks Smeargle here. He's going to top the Smeargle. Salamence is going to go straight for Hypo. He's not even going to Tailwind. But at this point, like, I don't know. I think damage is fine here. You weaken Eruption. You get to, keep your Salamence pretty healthy, and so, I'd like that play from Ethan. And it's obviously smart for Ricky to taunt the Smeargle because something would have gone to sleep.
Yeah, and because we didn't see Spiky Shield or Fake Out going before that taunt happened, we knew that it had to be some other move that wasn't going to go off because of the taunt, because we've seen all 4 moves. But yeah, that Salamence not able to get a Tailwind off because he used Hyper Voice instead. But yeah, like you said, it weakened Eruption, so Salamence takes, a quarter of his HP. And then Smeargle, not known for being particularly bulky, so it's no surprise maybe that he's down to his Focus Sash. But no Tailwind on either side now, so all things being equal, they are fairly equal, I guess. So yeah, that was a pretty good play. I think it looks like Ethan was probably expecting either a taunt or a Tailwind out of his opponent, maybe. So, like, throwing that Spore down on Groudon was pretty cool. If that's the slot that he decided to go for, or throwing it on Crobat. But, yeah, no. Just definitely an interesting turn 1 there. Yep.
We do see a Tailwind coming out from Crobat. A good play from Ricky because it matches Tailwind if Ethan decides to go for it, but it also gives you the advantage if Ethan goes for more damage with Hyper Voice, which is exactly what happened. So I liked that play as opposed to a straight-up taunt into the Salamence, because it made sure that you ended that turn at neutral at worst. Some more damage on a Salamence with Flamethrower is huge, though, because now another Flamethrower will be able to pick it off. And if you're Crobat here, you can possibly taunt the Xerneas to make sure that it doesn't start Geomancy.
Yeah, so, honestly, that turn 1 Hyper Voice was great out of Ethan, and maybe just got a little bit greedy, or is very, very worried about that taunt. So trying to play it a little bit safe around those taunts, and it looks like just that bit of play style from Ricky where he's been pretty taunt happy, looks like it's really playing in Ricky's favor right now.
Yeah. I would love to see a Super Fang into that Xerneas slot. I think knowing that Tailwind is up, it's a much more aggressive play, because even if Xerneas does decide to go for a Geomancy, you can just haze it away next turn, but does go for a taunt instead. I understand it, not wanting to lose, not wanting to miss a Super Fang, or just wanting to make sure Xerneas doesn't boost, but that's exactly the turn Ethan needed, because now he has Fake Out pressure on Smeargle. He can Fake Out the Groudon to make sure that Salamence doesn't get knocked out this turn, and you can Hyper Voice for the KO.
Yeah, and so what's interesting here is that, again, this is kind of like a little bit of mind games, right? Because there's always that threat that maybe Ricky decided to bring Tapu Lele this turn.
Oh yeah.
So we've got Salamence, and like you said, that fake out pressure, obviously, for anybody that's maybe potentially unaware, Crobat usually carries inner focus, which prevents flinching. So that means that Crobat is not likely to be the choice to be faked out here. And so at that point, there's always that idea that we're not expecting to see fake out go into a Crobat because it would do very little damage and also achieve very little. But are you surprised that you see that switch and the protect here? And like Ethan getting that Tailwind up for basically free?
No, I'm not surprised. If Crobat was staying in, it was gonna get knocked out by Hyper Voice if that's what Ethan wanted to go for. But Ethan making a really smart play in Tailwinding there, knowing that if Crobat does stay in, it's either going to taunt you, in which case it's just kind of a dead turn all around, or if it doesn't stay in, then you get a free Tailwind up. And so even if Crobat had gone for taunt there, the next turn I believe the Tailwind on Ricky's side would have run out, and so his Salamence would have been able to fire off a Hyper Voice and finish off the Groudon before it could attack.
Salamence is going to go for Protect here, trying to stay around, not take any extra damage from Fake Outs. Fake Out is going to go into that Salamence slot, so a very, very good Protect. And because, Smeargle was still taunted until the end of this turn, not able to do anything. So, I mean, pretty safe switches here. Able to get that Crobat in completely unscathed, understanding that Smeargle doesn't have any offensive potential here.
Right. No, it does have the Spore option now that Taunt has worn off, but I guess his Tailwind is up. So yeah, he does have the option to Spore here if you want to go for something like a Spore into Incineroar, and then for some damage with Hyper Voice. A pretty safe position for Ethan now. He's worked himself into a much more serviceable spot where now he has a little bit of momentum. He's going to be able to get a knockout with Hyper Voice, put something to sleep with his Smeargle, and then start going from there.
And it looks like Ricky is just trying to stall out Tailwind as much as possible. You see that he has preserved as much as possible that Crobat, right? So going ahead and switching that Crobat out, knowing that he's got very little HP on that Groudon, so it looks like that might have been a sacrificial play. And then Spore coming out on Incineroar so that it can't do anything but burn one turn of sleep.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to sacrifice something, I think Groudon was the right call. It was already really low to the point where anything from Salamence or Xerneas would be able to knock it out. And so its main source of damage, Eruption, is neutered pretty significantly. And I think it's smart. You have the Mewtwo in the back that's full health. You have this Incineroar that, hopefully it doesn't have to stay asleep for too long. And then you have Crobat in the back, which I think Ricky probably wanted to preserve just for Tailwind. Yeah. Just so we can come in later and possibly get another Tailwind up. And that's kind of his last check to Xerneas at this point, because the Incineroar on Ricky's side is now in position, or in range of the +2 Moonblast. And so he's got to be really careful when he faces that down.
And so Salamence out here, very low health. Smeargle, 1 HP, because we know we had it Focus Sash. Incineroar, still at pretty good HP right now. And this is the last turn of Ethan's Tailwind. So as long as everything can stay happy and healthy here on Ricky's side, he might be able to take advantage of that preserved Crobat. So we do see that Mewtwo is going to go ahead and Protect at this point. Smeargle's going for a Spiky Shield, trying to do a little bit of residual damage to any physical moves that might be going his way. Salamence going for Double Edge directly into Mewtwo, which is protecting, so no damage there. And Incineroar staying asleep, so basically a moot turn. Nothing happens, essentially.
Yeah, nothing at all. Tailwind ending is nice. Did Tailwind end, actually?
Yes.
I don't know if it did. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so Tailwind ending is good for Ricky because now he has the speed advantage with Mewtwo again. But the Smeargle Spiky Shielding that turn means that it sticks around, and it will be able to follow me and attack away from the Salamence, which could very easily go for its own Tailwind again. And so Ethan doing a really good job of making sure he has all the tools he needed. Because this Salamence, it's been at exactly this amount of health for a few turns now.
Yeah. And so I feel like there's a couple ways that this turn can go. And here we've got the Follow Me, right? And so I think that Ricky has to definitely be careful because I mean, he's going to get this Psystrike out here, but it goes into the Smeargle slot. And now basically this Mewtwo is wide open and available to take potentially a double edge or let Ethan set up this Tailwind. And so this Tailwind now set up. Incineroar still asleep.
I think Tailwind is absolutely the right play there. Yeah, if you double edge, you might knock out the Mewtwo, but you also knock out your own Salamence. And going for Tailwind instead there means that you keep Salamence around to possibly fire off another Hyper Voice. You bring Groudon in here, and combination of Hyper Voice and Precipice Blades will definitely knock out either of these Pokemon. And so, Ethan's put himself in a really good spot here. And I say all he has to do is hit his Blades to win, but I think we all know that it's not really that simple.
Yeah. But, honestly, overall, great positioning from Ethan. He's preserved basically the HP on his Pokemon as best as possible, given what kind of damage has been spit out at him. And he's only lost Smeargle. So Salamence here still in the red, and as you've mentioned, and I will repeat, that this Salamence has been at this red HP for so long.
Probably like 5 or 6 turns at this point.
At least. Incineroar at this point, he's going to go ahead and switch out because he knows that he's waking up next turn. Crobat at very low HP. Mewtwo is going to go ahead and protect. I think that's a pretty smart move, knowing that you're going to sacrifice this Crobat here. It's going to be knocked out immediately by this Hyper Voice. But you know that Mewtwo is not going to eat a Fire Punch or a Precipice Blades. And now you've got Incineroar coming back out here, going to be able to intimidate any potential damage from Salamence or Groudon, and has Fake Out pressure.
Yeah, no, definitely a smart play from Ricky. The Crobat wasn't going to be doing much for the rest of this game, considering Tailwind was already up on Ethan's end. And so, he gets to switch it out, bring Incineroar back in for the Intimidate. If he wakes up this turn, he gets a Fake Out off, but Ethan does have the option to switch out this Groudon and bring it back in later. And so, the Intimidate is helpful, but it's probably just a little bit too late. Just because Ricky's going to have a hard time, keeping up with this Groudon at this point. He's going to have a hard time knocking it out.
Yeah, and even if he uses like a double Protect here and uses Protect on Groudon and Salamence, Ethan still has another turn of Tailwind after this. There's 2 more turns of Tailwind left. But it looks like Ethan, understanding that he's been intimidated on this Salamence, is going to go ahead and go for a special attack with Hyper Voice and hit both sides of the field. He's going to lose this Salamence at this point due to that Psystrike, but Fake Out only doing a little bit of damage, and preventing damage from those Precipice Blades.
Yeah, so Ethan, getting a little bit more damage off with Hyper Voice, losing the Salamence, but Xerneas comes in here, and Tailwind is still up, and so, if Ethan wanted to go for something like a Geomancy this turn, he'd be able to boost up and know for sure that he would knock out both of these Pokemon on the next turn with Dazzling Gleam. But it's a little bit of a risk. Psystrike plus a Flare Blitz in the Sun possibly could knock out the Xerneas, and if you miss a Precipice Blades, then you're kind of putting yourself at risk of getting knocked out. And so it kind of depends on how Ethan wants to hedge his bets. If he wants to go for Precipice Blades, easily knock out Incineroar. Probably not Mewtwo, but a Fire Punch may be able to do the job. Something like Fire Punch plus Moonblast or Dazzling Gleam would probably do it. And so Ethan just has to kind of manage his resources here and make sure he doesn't get run over.
So it looks like Geomancy is going to come out here. He really wants to be able to be faster and stronger than everything else out on the field. That likely means that he's probably going to try and do some offensive pressure with this Groudon, since we didn't see it go for Protect. Incineroar and Mewtwo out here with a big amount of damage. Psystrike hitting on the physical defensive side of Xerneas here, doing over half. And we've got Precipice Blades, which appears to have not missed either side. Yep. Incineroar is going to be knocked out here. And so now we've got Mewtwo basically against the world.
I think that was a safer play than I originally made it out to be. Just because I think all you had to do if you're Ethan is hit 1 Blades there. If you double missed, you're in a pretty bad spot. But hitting both of them means that... hitting just one of them means that if you hit the Incineroar, obviously you knock it out. If you hit the Mewtwo and you miss the Incineroar, you probably lose Xerneas to Flare Blitz, but you're still a Groudon at full health against a Mewtwo, which won't be able to knock you out. And so that was much more safe than I originally made it out to be. And Ethan, recognizing that it would have had to go really, really poorly in order for him to lose that game.
You know what? I want to give credit to both of these players. Ricky played unbelievably well. And I think that he just barely couldn't overcome the versatility that Ethan's team has.
Right.
So now it's going to be Leonard versus Ethan in the finals. So we're going to wrap things up here. We're going to prep everything for the stream to go into finals, and we'll see you in there.